Yes, this is directed towards Jordan Peterson. You stated before to the BBC that by adhering to people's preferred pronouns, that it's the starting point to an authoritarian regime or society. Is it possible, however, that it's more about giving people more rights and liberty, or even something as fundamental as respect?
Jordan.
Well, I never said that. What I said was that I wasn't going to allow the contents of my speech to be dictated by a virtue-signaling government, when never in the history of an English common law society had a government dared to regulate the actual voluntary contents of someone's speech except in a commercial situation.
Just explain, Jordan, to those in the audience who don't know precisely what you're talking about, what it was the government of Canada tried to
provincial
legislate.
and Canadian, they did legislate it. The provincial and Canadian government, or the provincial and federal governments in Canada, mandated the use of personal pronouns and made it a criminal offence not to use them, at least under some circumstances. And there's been a variety of negative consequences of that, including the persecution of a teaching assistant at a university known as Wilfrid Laurier. And it isn't a matter of respect at all. And look, in the 1940s, the American Supreme Court, and Americans have a very tight, what would you call, control or tight respect for free speech, decided that it was not constitutional for the government to place mandatory requirements on what people were required to utter in terms of their voluntary speech. There are certain things you can't say, but the government's not to mandate what you have to say. And respect and altruism and all of that is completely irrelevant as far as I'm concerned.
So just to clarify that point, if the government had said, made it a kind of voluntary thing, but with advice that that's what should happen, would you have gone along with that?
Well, they've been doing that for years,
yeah.
and I'm perfectly... Look, I've dealt with all sorts of people in my life. I treat people very politely, as a matter of course. If I'm dealing with someone reasonable, I address them in the manner that seems to be most appropriate to the social situation and most conducive to their, let's say, well-being mutually agreed upon. But as soon as the government decides that they have the right to decide what I have to say because of some false altruism on their part or some underlying and unexpressed ideology, then the answer to that is no damn way.
Yeah. Catherine McGregor.
Look, obviously, Jordan's point on free speech has weight and should be attributed weight. And my experience of this has been, and I've lived it, I've been called he and it more often. I'm being called it as we speak tonight, I know, because I get that most days in one form or another. I think my Adam's apple is trending on Twitter, if my last glimpse was any indication. I would pick up a couple of points on jurisprudence, though, Jordan, if I may, and one is that the government in common law jurisdictions has prescribed speech in all kinds of ways. The reason William Shakespeare wrote Hamlet and Richard III and Macbeth was that it was an offence punishable by death to compass the death of the sovereign. So any of his plays in which the regal figure was killed during the reign of Elizabeth I you could not actually write an English-based play. Compassing the death of the sovereign is a massive infringement on free speech, satire. Try telling a flight attendant when you leave town tomorrow that you can't remember whether you packed your bomb in your luggage or not, and see how that goes in terms of whether you get your collar felt for a satirical jest, potentially. So there are all kinds of regulations of speech. I don't believe, as a minority, the trans community can legislate our way to acceptance. We can't. We have too often, in my experience, inverted the power relations. We're a telephone booth minority, despite the arguments that there's an epidemic of transgenderism. We're more visible, and that is destabilising to people's notions of binary gender. I get that. I just think your first point in your opening remarks about the individual dignity of the human being a Western concept, and I agree with you 100% on that. I would love to think a day will come when we don't need codes like C16 to mandate this, that where the experience I've largely had, by the way, and especially humbling in the world of global cricket, where some of the most alpha guys around have treated me with just enormous respect, and it's a given. I've been very blessed. I'm more privileged than most trans people.
Some of them actually suggested you play for the women's cricket leagues